journalist and presenter. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Just what's the impact around the world today for football?
Well, Tom, I think I look at practically every newspaper front page in the world today is a picture of the great man, Pele, who broke the mould. And your last guest there on Vivian Westwood talking about being the first, that was Pele. He invented the beautiful game, if you like, that poetic way of playing. And you look at every modern footballer now, the recently crowned greatest of all time, in some eyes, not mine, Lionel Messi, had a hero. That was Pele. So many of his peers did as well, because he brought joy to the beautiful game and that sense of Brazilian rhythm and the magic you can see from these photographs everywhere. He was the first sporting superstar. He and Muhammad Ali, if you like, are the two greatest of all time. And everywhere he went, he was, football being the great global game. Even countries like the USA, where he eventually went when he finished playing at the very highest level with the New York Cosmos. He drew massive crowds there. This is way back in the 1970s. And, you know, he is, without doubt, one of the most famous sporting figures there will ever be. It's quite simple as that. And, you know, the arguments will go on about who was the greatest player. Pele was the first. And all the players you see now do the tricks that Pele did first. And that to me is his enduring legacy. And what a player. Statistics are just unrivaled too.
It is remarkable to me. I hadn't quite realised how young he was when he first got into the game, scoring in a World Cup final at the age of just 17 back in the 1950s. That will never be repeated.
No, we have a very excellent young English footballer who's 19 now, Jude Bellingham, who you have a hero like Pele as well. And but at 17 to be playing, I think when you look at the history of football, the Brazilians and the South Americans who loved all the flair did give players like Pele a chance, but his talent was unstoppable. Even at his mid-teens, they knew that he was going to be very special. He grew up in poverty, but he just played with a natural flair. And you know, Tom, it's so interesting to look at where that sense of magic comes from in South American football. You go back to the history of football, soccer, and in South America, they were introduced to it by the British. The railway workers of the late 19th century and the early 20th, they went there and clubs were set up. Messi's club, Newell's Old Boys, based on the railway workers in Argentina in the late 19th century. Corinthians in Brazil from the same source. And the difference was the British, we introduced the game, invented the game as far as the modern rule book went. So then the South Americans came along and they introduced their sense of rhythm and magic and the dancing feet, all the rest of it. That's where it came from. And Pele was the embodiment of that, really, as we saw at the age of 17 and for all of his career, that sense of rhythm and magic and just beauty and poetic beauty, which all came to a head really in the 1970 World Cup when in Mexico he won his third World Cup. Wonderful talent and unforgettable memories.
And of course, for the people of Brazil, a country that has had some tough times, that has, of course, a big problem with poverty, that has experienced political instability, finding a national game in itself really through Pele and an almost unifying figure, of course, being referred to as the king, days of national mourning being declared for him. This is something that has brought that country together.
Yeah, until you go to Brazil and see their way of life and that sense of magic. I went to the 2014 World Cup there, and it was just a wonderful experience because you everywhere you go, walk down the street. I watched games not in the stadium, but in the street where everybody came out and they put their TVs out of the window, and that was the magic that the seed that was sown by Pele's generation. It was just a sense of imagination and freedom for anybody who had that. You've only got to go now to the favelas and all the kids coming out of those places. Neymar, for example, recently. There were so many of them. The recent Brazil team that should have done much better in this World Cup, full of fantastic, twinkling, dancing players who could just do it. And it's their national game, and it's the spiritual home. Whereas the Brits invented the rules, the spiritual game, home of football is Brazil. And you've seen it, 3 days of national mourning. It's going to be all over the news for days to come. We saw it also with Diego Maradona when he died fairly recently. There were days of national mourning, and those two players were from peas in the pod. And as Pele said himself, I hope one day we can reunite in heaven. And that's the situation now, because Pele and Maradona just broke the mold. Just wonderful footballers who will never be matched. Messi has made his challenge, but all from the same part of the world. South America, the spiritual home of football, and Pele will always be the king, I think.
Well, what a legacy. Chris Scudder, thank you so much for talking us through the remarkable life of Pele there.